That short film from Project Everyone is a rallying call, the world's to-do list, and it's a powerful message. To open today's meeting and to share his thoughts on what it will take to get the goals done is the UN Secretary General, His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres. Welcome, Mr. Secretary General.
So we can't see program yet?
Excellencies, guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Our world is challenged like never before, from climate change to conflicts to COVID-19, which is putting the Sustainable Development Goals further out of reach. It would be easy to lose hope. But we are not hopeless or helpless. We have a path to recovery if we choose to take it. That's what this SDG moment is all about. Coming together to save our planet and each other. Coming together also with the BTS today, which is a fantastic contribution. Now, 2 weeks ago, I launched our common agenda, a plan to reboot the multilateral system and gather the world around our common objectives. Because only by recovering together can we get the Sustainable Development Goals back on track. And I see 5 areas for urgent action. First, we need to end this pandemic. Our response has been too slow and too unequal. I call on the world to mobilize behind a global vaccination plan that doubles vaccine production to reach 70% of the world's population by the middle of next year. Second, we need to get down to the business of a sustainable and equitable recovery for all so that we stay on track to end poverty by 2030. And this means making bold investments in systems that support human development, from education and universal social protection to healthcare and jobs. It means putting people above profits, including through progressive taxation and ending tax evasion, money laundering, and illicit financial flows. And it means reforming the global financial system, tackling debt distress, and ensuring that developed countries benefit from the recent allocation of special drawing rights. Third, equal rights for women and girls. We cannot achieve any of the SDGs without gender equality. We need bold investments to make sure every girl has a seat in the classroom and the skills she needs to chart her own future. We need to dismantle the power structures that allow discrimination, violence, and economic hardship to keep 1/2 of humanity down. And we need to make sure that girls and women have a seat at every table, from the halls of power to the boardrooms of business. Quatrièmement,
fourth, we need to end the war on our planet. This means committing to zero emissions by 2050. Ambitious climate and biodiversity plans. No new coal plants after 2021, and mobilising $100 billion a year for climate action, and helping developing countries make the shift to green economies, a top priority of the upcoming COP26 meeting in Glasgow.
We need you, all of you. All of you are critical to global recovery. I urge you to work with your governments to put people first in their budgets and recovery plans. Dear friends, the pathway is there. The choice is ours. Let's move forward with hope and conviction, and I thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for underscoring the fact that we are neither hopeless nor helpless. And also for setting out the 5 key priorities for our recovery and beyond. I'm sure we'll no doubt hear more throughout the day. And next, I have the honor of introducing His Excellency, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, President of the 76th Session of the United National General Assembly, the Global Town Hall of our Global Village. Welcome, Mr. President.
Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to speak at the second SDG moment, an invaluable platform in our joint efforts to deliver on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. As we are all aware, the pandemic has severely impacted the SDGs. But the irony is that the SDGs themselves provide us the most comprehensive and universal toolkit in our efforts to recover sustainably. The decade of action launched in 2020 will now need to be a decade of recovering sustainably. Excellencies, my promise for a presidency of hope during this 76th session of the General Assembly is underpinned by 5 rays of hope, each intrinsically connected to the SDGs. Our first and second rays of hope on recovering from COVID-19 and rebuilding sustainably correspond directly to SDG 3 on good health and well-being, as well as SDG 8 on jobs and economic growth. The third ray on responding to the needs of the planet corresponds to a multitude of SDGs, including SDG 7 on clean energy, SDG 13 on climate action, and SDG 14 on the ocean and seas. And our final 2 rays covering human rights and UN revitalization cut across and uphold the entirety of the SDG agenda. Why else pursue such ambitious goals if not to respect and enhance the rights of the people everywhere? How better to achieve than through a multilateral system that is equipped to do just that. In essence, ladies and gentlemen, the workings of getting the SDGs back on track are our shared responsibility. The General Assembly can and is willing to play a part. Going forward, the gaps in political will and resource commitment remain a common fault line in our resolve to progress the SDGs. This must change. We need to ensure that countries, in particular the LDCs, LLDCs, and the SIDS, have access to adequate resources and capacity, support in their efforts to recover from the pandemic and achieve the SDG targets. Like everything else on policy, there is no one-size-fits-all. For this very reason, the SDG moment and platforms such as the ECOSOC's High-Level Political Forum offer an opportunity to reflect on where we are, where we could be, and what is holding us back, and the way forward. I encourage all to share success, best practices, lessons learned, challenges, and failures alike to achieve the SDGs. Only together, through effective collaboration and meaningful cooperation, we will learn to find the best way to move forward. Let the setback that the world has seen strengthen our resolve and reinforce our determination to recover from the pandemic, to build sustainably and achieve the SDGs. Together, it is possible, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for those encouraging words. We can't measure progress without the right metrics. So before we go any further, let's get a reality check on SDG progress 6 years after their adoption. We're joined in the SDG studio by Ms. Claire Casey, the Global Head of Policy and Insights at Economist Impact.
When world leaders came together in 2015 to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals, we all knew the challenge ahead of us. And we've made progress, but it has been hard-won, uneven, and fragile. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us just how fragile. Today, humanity faces a stark and urgent choice. Do we allow these fractures to grow, or do we break through to a greener, safer, and more equitable future? At Economist Impact, we're dedicated to driving positive change by using data and evidence to better understand the biggest issues and evaluate the best solutions. And we've been closely tracking action on the SDGs. Today, as we explore progress against the Sustainable Development Goals, let's remember, we know what we have to do, and we have the tools. The question is, do we have the will to act and keep the promise of Agenda 2030? Let's start with Goal 1, eliminating extreme poverty by 2030. In just 18 months, the COVID-19 pandemic erased 5 years' worth of progress, pushing more than 97 million people back into extreme poverty. If we don't take action now to right our course, we risk arriving at 2030 with more than 600 million people living in extreme poverty. We also know we can't move forward without women and girls. Since 2015, we've made progress on gender equality, but not nearly enough. Maternal mortality continues to fall, but we need to move more than 4 times faster if we're to achieve our target of 70 deaths per 100,000 live births by 2030. In politics, women now hold 26% of seats in national parliaments. But at the current rate of improvement, it will take no fewer than 40 years to achieve gender parity. And when we look at the workforce, women are still grossly underrepresented, with less than half of women participating compared to more than 70% of men. This hasn't budged since 2015. COVID has only exacerbated these disparities. Female-dominated industries were disproportionately affected across both formal and informal sectors. The number of women employed declined by 54 million in 2020. As COVID impoverishes communities, closes schools, and reduces access to reproductive health care, it's estimated that 10 million more girls than previously projected are at a risk of becoming child brides through 2030. The risk of violence has also risen. Before the pandemic, we knew that 1 in 3 women would experience violence at least once in her lifetime. During the pandemic, some countries reported a devastating 5-fold increase in calls to helplines. When we talk about gender equality, we tend to address it through this humanitarian lens. But equality doesn't just benefit individuals. It benefits whole societies and economies. Achieving gender equality could unlock $12 trillion. The opposite is also true. Nations that fail women fail. One powerful tool to ensure equality of opportunity across communities and around the world is connectivity. And this is an area where we've made tremendous progress. 4 billion people around the world are connected to the internet, 1 billion of whom came online since 2015. But COVID has acted sort of like a time machine, hurtling us all forward into a digital future in which we access our jobs, our education, healthcare, financial services, even our friends and family, all online. So for those 3 billion people still unconnected, the costs have never been higher. 1/3 of children globally were unable to access remote learning during COVID lockdowns, and we saw the immediate impact. 101 million children fell below minimum reading proficiency levels in 2020. We also know the returns we get from investments in connectivity. They're massive. Connecting schools to the internet boosts GDP by up to 20% in least connected countries. It also shows how intertwined the SDGs are. An increase in connectivity can contribute to increases in educational outcomes, prosperity, and gender equality. But a prerequisite to meaningful connectivity is access to reliable, affordable electricity. And after years of good progress, we've lost ground here as well. In 2020, we saw the number of people without electricity in Africa increase for the first time in 6 years. Without major changes today, we could reach 2030 with 660 million people living without access to power. Expanding electricity must be addressed within the context of the ongoing worsening crisis that is climate change. Only by unleashing the power of clean energy will we be able to end energy poverty while protecting our planet. After a brief pause in 2020 when we all stayed home, emissions are back on the rise. Climate change is not a future challenge. We're already feeling its impact. The economic costs from extreme weather and wildfires were $1.3 trillion over the last 10 years. That's a 40% increase from the previous decade. And if we continue on this course, we will create an unlivable planet, with the greatest suffering borne by those least responsible. In 2015, the world came together in Paris to commit to limit global warming, and we've made important progress since then. The cost of renewables continues to decline. Clean power is now often the most affordable option, and low-carbon fuels have surpassed coal as the largest source of electricity generation. But as we look towards COP26 in Glasgow this November, it must be with clear eyes. Our policies are grossly insufficient to meet the present challenge. Our research tells us that more governments and businesses are turning their attention to this issue than ever before, but it's not enough. We must act now to prevent the worst. COVID was a wake-up call and a model for what's possible. It showed us what happens when an abstract threat becomes very real. In 2020 alone, governments mobilized and deployed $14 trillion in pandemic support. Through unprecedented public and private collaboration, we developed and deployed safe and effective vaccines faster than anyone imagined. We did it because we had to. A sustainable, inclusive future demands we act with the same urgency. Governments, businesses, civil society working together. To achieve the promise of Agenda 2030, we will need partnerships and collective action, technology and innovation, effective institutions and delivery mechanisms, better data to set baselines and track our progress, and a relentless focus on our responsibility to future generations and to those most at risk of being left behind. We are 1 year into the decade of action. It is time to act.
Our thanks to Ms. Casey on the very sober and clear-eyed look at what has to be done to get the SDGs back on track. And as we heard earlier from the UN Secretary General, doing so is going to require action from all actors and the engagement of all people, especially youth, which is why we're therefore pleased and, as a Korean American, distinctly honored to be joined by His Excellency Mr. Moon Jae-in, the President of the Republic of Korea, to deliver a statement and to introduce a very special guest. Welcome, Mr. President.
President Abdullah Saeed, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, distinguished delegates, I am extremely delighted to join you at SDG Moment 2021, and I am grateful for inviting me to this special occasion. A research institute of the United Nations recently released a report that found that all disasters in the world are interconnected. For instance, the heat wave in the Arctic and cold wave in Texas, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic and Cyclone Amphan that hit Bangladesh, are closely connected with one another through the links of carbon emissions and environmental destruction. If the problems are interconnected, then so be the solutions. When humanity transcends national boundaries to work together, that in and of itself would be first step towards surmounting a crisis. Right in this hall 6 years ago, the UN agreed to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals, and 2 years ago, it proclaimed the Decade of Action until 2030. Humanity's strides towards an inclusive future were held back by COVID-19. Yet, ironically, it was the very pandemic that brought home the desperate need for SDGs. Our commitment to action grew stronger. we must move ourselves beyond simply overcoming the crisis to build back better and stronger. If actions that we take together are interconnected, we will deliver without a doubt. First, our commitment to inclusion and mutual prosperity must be immediately put into action now. That action can begin with an equitable access and distribution of COVID-19 vaccines by the international community. At G7, the Republic of Korea made a $200 million pledge to COVAX AMC. As one of the global vaccine hubs, we're committed to making continued endeavors to expand vaccine supply and support. Taking a step further, we stand ready to actively contribute to strengthening international health cooperation at WHO, among others. Second, we must collaborate beyond our borders in responding to the climate crisis. Our planet is getting hotter faster than anticipated, with extreme weather events occurring one after another in every part of the world. Carbon neutrality is a goal that developed and developing countries alike must move towards in tandem. To this end, leading countries in climate action must partner with developing countries by sharing their experiences and transferring technologies. Korea plans to finalize its 2050 carbon neutrality scenario by the end of October and submit its updated NDC at COP26. Korea will scale up Green New Deal ODA and share its experience and technology as a nation that has grown from a developing to a developed one, thus actively supporting developing countries in their endeavors towards green recovery and carbon neutrality. Third, sustainable development demands that we fully harness the fourth industrial revolution technologies. Digital technologies and infrastructure, however, engender new divides and inequalities at the same time. Addressing the digital gap and inequalities thus presents another challenge of our time. These are the problems that we also encounter in energy transition process. Our digital and green transitions, therefore, must be inclusive and leave no one behind.
마지막으로
Lastly, we must respect our future generations and gather the wisdom for intergenerational coexistence. We must move beyond our differences in ideas and cultures across generations. All generations, as we strive to transcend the boundaries of nationality, race, and gender, to communicate and connect to one another, must recognize that after all, we're part of a global community. For poverty, inequality, climate change, and other crises that remain unresolved by older generations, the voices of future generations must be heard more attentively, as so doing would indeed be a duty asked of the older generations. Fearing change, the older generations have left many problems unsolved, yet the younger generation's sensitivity and capacity for empathy may find us the solutions. We must not forget, in particular, that the future belongs to our future generations. Joining us today are an exceptionally outstanding group of young men who are connecting with the youth across the world, BTS, in the capacity as a special presidential envoy for future generations and culture. Together with BTS, the first ever special envoy from the private sector, I hope today's gathering will serve as an opportunity to mobilize the future generations' goodwill and action towards sustainable development. Guided by the conviction that no one is safe until everyone is safe, the Korean people will join the journey of inclusive international cooperation as your most reliable, steadfast companion, leaving no one behind. Thank you.
이제 제가
So I am going to introduce the next speaker to the podium. Probably the artist that is most loved by people around the world. Who have been designated as the special presidential envoy for future generations and culture. We're going to listen to their story, the BTS. Your Excellency Abdullah Shahid, President of the 76th United Nations General Assembly, Your Excellency Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Your Excellency President Moon Jae-in, and distinguished leaders from around the world, it is an honor to be here today, where BTS appointed as special presidential envoys of the Republic of Korea. We're here today to share the stories of our future generation. Before we came here, we asked the young people in their teens and 20s around the world about their past 2 years and about the world they find themselves in today. Jin will share some of the answers we received. Yes, should we take a look? You can feel the good vibes from just looking at these. There were times during the past 2 years when I too felt bewildered and troubled. But still here, we have people who cry out, let's live on, let's make the best of this moment. Because we can't stand still when we are in the ideal time of our lives to take on new challenges. It wasn't as if we could blame anyone, and you must have felt the frustration. Here I'm the same as I was yesterday, but the world changed like we were transported in a flash to a parallel world. I was saddened to hear that entrance and graduation ceremonies had to be canceled. These are moments in life you want to celebrate, and missing out on them must have been upsetting. We were heartbroken when our long-planned concert tours were canceled. And for a while, we yearned for the moments we wanted to make complete. Yes, it was a time for us to mourn for the things that COVID took away from us. A time to discover how precious each and every moment we'd taken for granted were. Suga mentioned the precious things we'd taken for granted, and lots of people answered our question by sharing pictures of their precious moments. Many people showed how they share their moments with nature. I think during these 2 years, they found dear the time they experienced and care for nature. Yes, but maybe because we feel an encroaching sense of dread that our time on this earth is limited, we just talked about the things we mourn, and I shudder to think about mourning for the earth. Everyone agrees that climate change is an important problem, but talking about what the best solution might be, that's not easy. It's a topic that's tough to make conclusions about. Yes, it is a tough discussion, but I learned while preparing for today that there are many young people who have an interest in environmental issues and choose it as their field of study. The future is unexplored territory, and that's where we, more than anyone, will spend our time. So these young people were searching for the answers to the question of how we must live that future. So I hope we don't just consider the future as grim darkness. We have people who are concerned for the world and searching for the answers. There are still many pages left in the story about us, and I thought we shouldn't talk like the ending's already been written. Of course, sometimes the world seems stuck in place, even if you're ready to go. Sometimes it feels like you've lost your way. There was a time when we felt the same way. I've heard that people in their teens and 20s today are being referred to as COVID's lost generation, that they've lost their way at a time when they need the most diverse opportunities and must try new things. But I think it's a stretch to say they're lost just because the paths they tread can't be seen by grown-up eyes.
Yes, take a look at these pictures. Here, we have many who are trying hard to continue their friendships online in new ways, start learning new things, live healthier lives. I'm sorry, excuse me.
네, 새롭게 공부를 시작하고 더
Yes, these kids are trying to learn new things and trying to figure new things out. They don't look lost. They look like they are finding new courage and taking on new challenges. I think that's why instead of the lost generation, a more appropriate name would be the welcome generation. Because instead of fearing change, this generation says welcome and keeps forging ahead. That's right. If we believe in possibilities and hope, even when the unexpected happens, we will not lose our way, but discover new ones. There will be choices we make that may not be perfect, but that does not mean there will be nothing we can do. That's what I think. What is important are the choices we make when we're faced with change, right? Some of you heard the news that we're coming to the UN, and a lot of you were wondering whether we have been vaccinated. And I'll take this opportunity to say yes. All 7 of us, of course, we received vaccinations. The vaccination was a sort of ticket to meeting our fans waiting for us and to being able to stand here before you today. Just like we said in our message today, we too are doing the things that we're able to do right now. Like the vaccinations, efforts are continuously underway to keep this new reality going forward. And I think the day we can meet again face to face is not far away. Until then, I hope we can fill each of our days to the brim with positive energy. We thought the world had stopped, but it continues to move forward. I believe that every choice we make is the beginning of change, not the end. I hope that in this nascent new world, we can all say to each other, welcome. And now, as we look forward to this future, the permission to dance is our message of welcome that we want to share with everyone today.
It's a that opinion when your heart just like a drum, beating louder with no way to guard it. When it all seems like it's wrong, say aloud to Elton John, to that feeling we're just getting started.
And when the nights get colder and the rhythms got you falling behind,
just dream about that moment when you look yourself right in the eye. Did you say I wanna dance? The music's got me going and nothing that can stop how we move. Yeah, let's make a plans to live just like a golden and rolling like a dancing fools.
we don't need to worry, 'cause when before we know how to land.
Don't need to talk the talk, just walk the walk tonight. 'Cause we don't need permission to dance. There's always something that's standing in the way, but if you don't let it phase you, you know just how to put just get that right vibe. Yeah, there's no looking back. There ain't no one to put our feet on. Got this alright. Yeah, so when it's over, the time is not to us to it right. Yeah, we keep going and stay up until we see the sun. As we say, I wanna dance. The music's got me going and nothing that can stop how we move. Yeah, let's make a mess and leave just like it golden and rolling like a dancing fool. We don't need to worry, 'cause when we fall we know how to land. Don't need to talk the talk, just walk the walk tonight.
'Cause we don't need permission to dance.
Na 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 na, na 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 na, na 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 na. We don't need permission to dance. Na 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 na, na 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 na, na 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 na.
Well, let me show you, and then we can keep the fire alive.
'Cause it's not over till it's over. Say it one more time. Say, I wanna dance. The music's got me going and nothing can stop how we move. Hey,
Let's break our plans and live just like it golden and rolling like a dancing fool.
like we're dancing fools. We don't need to worry, 'cause when before we know how to
What if we could take